Sounds good.
Want to do Tyrion first, or do you want to do Cersei first?
Sure, I'll do Tyrion.
Awesome.
All right. So, Tyrion, we decided we're mostly talking about the arc, not the plot. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, let's assume everyone knows the plot.
Yeah, that's a good call. All right. So the arc is pretty simple. You start with Tyrion having just murdered his father, blackout drunk in a wine barrel, in a boat, and it pretty much stays that terrible. And I think this is arguably the strongest part of the FeastDance read, is that it's obvious how messed up Tyrion is. So he then spends the rest of it traveling. He figures a lot of stuff out because he's clever. And he also sort of slowly pulls himself together, though he doesn't really start pulling himself together until the arrival of Penny, who I think is a very interesting character. Because even on the boat, where he's being smart and clever and savvy, he's still drunk all the time. And then there's that really awful encounter in the brothel, which is arguably Tyrion's lowest moment. The one where he's threatening the whore. That's fairly nasty. And then he meets Penny and starts to try to make things up to her. They end up in a boat that sinks. They're kind of set up by the widow of the waterfront, who knows the boat's going to sink. And then they eventually manage to escape slavery and join the Second Sons. So his arc is, he basically moves from Tyrion at his very worst, like completely, his alcoholism out of control, his misogyny out of control, his as clever as ever, but completely drowned in misery. And he sort of may begin to regain some humanity and some self-control towards the end of it. And I think that's because of a theory that I'm a big personal fan of, which is the dwarf's Penny theory, that Penny is his bastard daughter. I don't know if everyone knows that, but the theory of that is basically that their mother, that Penny and Oppo's mother was Tysha. She's around the right age. Dwarfism is genetic. And it also, a lot of people behind that theory think that he's going to end up sleeping with her, and then she's going to end up singing that song that Tysha used to sing a little bit after that, and thus his sort of...
Oh my god, it's like Old Boy. So do you think at this point you think Tyrion doesn't know?
No, I think he has no idea, but I think that he feels guilty and sort of sees something in her and is kind of trying to a little bit redeem himself. Because
is the evidence purely physical then, that she's a dwarf, dwarfism is genetic,
but
let me find... Nobody expects the butter.
But Apo and Penny's father are dwarfs too. The father is the one who came up with the jousting, the jousting.
I know, but trick. Their stepfather could just as easily have been I'm trying to find the original place I read this, because it's...
And it's not clear they were Westerosi anyway, so...
The theory sounds great, but I think the age doesn't work out, because Penny is about 19, isn't she? And Tyrion's 26.
Yeah, she's definitely 18 and stuff.
Ages would not work out for this theory.
Give me just 1 second. I'm about to have found it.
Yeah, towards the end, the Tyrion we see reminds me a lot of Tyrion from number 1.
Found it. Dwarf's Penny, Part 1. So, the theory is... No, that's not the first one. What? I'm sorry, I'm being slow here.
No problem.
But I have to say, this is what I love about these books. You can read them so many times and think you're so immersed in them, and someone can still come out with something you've never thought of and just gets you going. Brilliant.
But yeah, that's I've never thought of that before as a possibility.
Yeah.
But I think mostly
Yeah.
because of the ages, I wouldn't. Because Tyrion's daughter would have to be 14 or 15.
Okay, here you go. So, they're basically saying that they think that Tyrion's terrible at judging ages, which is true. He's terrible at judging ages at all points in the book. So they're guessing that people think she's like 18, but she's probably like 15 or 14.
Well, there's also Apo, who is much older than her, so and they are not half
she and
brother,
Apo
half sister. So they are proper brother and sister. So
there we go. Now I have the actual thingy. Tysha was approximately 13 when she met Tyrion. And she vanishes. You meet Penny. She's a dwarf. She has dark brown hair like Tysha. She's young and seems emotionally immature. She and her brother were nicknamed after coins. Her family lived in Old Town, which would make sense as a place for Tysha to have went to. Her mother loved to sing to them and is dead. And then Penny, Tyrion thinks she's 18 or 19, but Tyrion is a terrible judge of age in all the Sansa chapters. He always thinks she's like 4 years older than she is.
Isn't it like biologically sort of improbable that all the guys who raped her, that Tyrion would be the one who gets her pregnant?
Yeah, but it's fiction.
Yeah, but George R. R. Martin typically is quite good about sort of.
No, he's terrible at the biological stuff.
Yeah?
Yeah, all the genetic stuff he does is utterly incoherent. The
Really?
stuff with like Lannister hair color and stuff, now it doesn't make any sense.
Okay, well that just shows how biologically naive I am, because I'm just like,
that's why everyone always teases him about Martin genetics. The idea that like there's somehow magic Baratheon dark hair that like is never diluted by them marrying other people. Or like the Targaryens always look like Targaryens. It's completely incoherent.
So then I think it would be utterly weak if after all the people who raped her, she just happened to get pregnant by the one guy, because dwarfism is genetic, that we could tell that it's him that was the father.
It's possible. I mean, I don't know if it's true. I always like it as sort of I think that a lot of the time there's a lot of Greek tragedy in these books, like Catelyn's Cassandra. She's always right, and bad things always happen. No one ever listens to her, and then things get worse. And I sort of think that like Tyrion eventually accidentally sleeping with his daughter is the sort of thing that would sort of complete his like image, is this sort of like as like a hero in the Greek tragic sense, where he's not actually a very good guy and bad things happen to him. But you're right. It's a crack theory.
And I also think it sort of ruins the arc of the character, which is that the low point is when he actually becomes quite abusive to this whore, and then starts to remake himself by the end of that book. I think to then take him even to a lower point is unnecessary, because we've seen him get very bleak and dark.
That's true.
And nasty, and
that's true.
That's the classic George R. R. Martin thing to do, right? Take someone really low, break them down, then build them up again. So,
yeah. But my one other thing about that is I don't know if he is really being built up again, because as much as he's regaining competence, he has not yet really regained any of his like. I mean, Tyrion's never a great guy, but Tyrion has a moral center in Storm and Clash and Game of Thrones. And by Dance, even as he's starting to pull his shit together, like the things he's demanding of the Second Sons are things like he gets to murder and rape Cersei. Like, so he's not like, and his hatred of her is understandable, but his viciousness is, I think, still a sign that like I don't know if he's really redeeming himself just yet. I think he has further to fall, but we'll see. And the other main theory from Tyrion chapters, there are two other things that are important. One is, how are things going to go with him and the Second Sons? What's going to end up happening to Jorah, et cetera, et cetera. And the other is Illyrio, Aegon, Blackfyre stuff. I'm a big believer in the Aegon's Illyrio's son. I think that's kind of unquestionable. The boy's clothing and Illyrio's love for him, I don't understand people who don't believe that. I get why some people think Illyrio's not a Blackfyre. That's understandable. and I think that's much more up for debate. But I also think that it makes the most sense as an explanation for why they're doing what they're doing. And that's another example of Tyrion being terrible with ages. He has no idea how old Aegon is.
However, wouldn't that be proof of, well, that's part of the evidence of Aegon being fake, because he says that Aegon would be 15 or 16, whereas the real Aegon, if he did live, would be about 17 or 18.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think Aegon is probably somewhere between 14 and 17, but the fact that Tyrion doesn't immediately think, the age is wrong, says to me that he knows he's not that good at ages. But maybe that's overthinking it. But I don't know. What do you guys think of the Blackfire theory?
I believe, I trust. When so Quaid comes to Dany and gives her the prophecy, right? And she says the Mama's dragon. So the Mama's dragon could only mean Aegon, and Aegon is. I don't know whether she means Mama's dragon in the sense that it is Varys' dragon or it is a fake dragon.
Or both.
But the Kuwait prophecy does have some mistakes in it. Like let me quote Kuwait's prophecy again. Hear me, Daenerys. The glass candles are burning. Soon comes the pale mare, and after her the others: Kraken, Dark Flame, Lion, and Griffin, the Sun's Son, and the Mama's Dragon. Trust none of them. Remember the Undying. Beware of the perfumed seneschal. So, well, it's in the terms of prophecy, it's a very simple prophecy to understand. So she's basically saying Victorian, Macaro, John
Marlon.
Cunnington, Tyrion, Quentin Martell, and then Mama's Dragon as in Aegon are coming to her. But this prophecy is wrong in some ways because Griffin and Aegon don't come to her; they instead go to Westeros. So I don't know whether it's Martin did not want to spoil it to us and he put this thing in, or Quaid simply just got it wrong. She is not seeing a prophecy. She's not foretelling the future. She just has spies or something. Just tell her that John Cunnington and these guys are heading her way, and
That's an interesting
so
theory.
if this was a prophecy, if this is a future, then Mama's Dragon has more significance to it. But if she's just using spies and just gathering this information and pretending to have a vision or something, then Mama's Dragon is not.
There's also the Mama's Dragon imagery at the House of the Undying. Where there's a dragon on poles, a Mama's Dragon.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I don't know. I think that the idea that he's Aegon Targaryen is insane. The idea that he's a wealthy merchant son, sure, why not? I don't know why Illyrio would care that much, but I can understand that could happen. I think the Blackfire makes the most sense, and I think it makes the most sense if Varys is Sarah's brother too, and Varys is a Blackfire.
Is a brother.
And I get why some people are like, oh, I don't want everyone to turn out to have secret ancestry. But I think it's important a lot of the time to remember that, these books blew up beyond anyone's capacity to predict. So there are a lot of things like Jon Snow is Rhaegar and Lyanna's son. That's the sort of thing that if he had written this in a trilogy like he thought he would in the 90s, 3 people would have figured it out by the time it was published. It's the fact that it's taken 20 years to write them, and that the fandom has expanded so greatly that we've become able to pick up all this stuff. So now there's a lot of the time I think people forget that when they're saying something's too obvious, because it's not too obvious. It's just that when you have a 20,000 people thinking about it, they figure it out.
Yeah, and thinking about it for 5 years.
Yeah.
I think it's got to be Blackfire related, and I like the idea that
yeah, me too.
That Mimi's a big proponent of, that the Duncan Egg stories are really so much more significant than people at first thought. As this kind of funny, slightly goofy kids thing.
I agree
completely. And
then
eventually, when we come to read back canon, they will be seen basically, and hopefully will be published as a book. It's almost like a prequel, and that to me is the hope for HBO, that rather than jumping ahead, but to keep the viewership, they will do prequel Duncan Egg stuff.
That would be great. I would love that.
That's an elegant solution.
I'm skeptical about that idea.
I don't think they'll do it, but that would be amazing. And also, the one other thing that it definitely makes me think that it's true is that, so we're always talking about, people always say it's implausible that a house that's supposed to be extinct, like Blackfyre Targaryen, has so many people left running around. And I'm like, guys, Stark is supposed to be extinct, and there's still 4 of the 5 kids running around and a bastard. Like, just because people think that it's all been obliterated doesn't mean that, like, they think that everyone's dead or missing, right? But Sansa, Arya, Bran, and Rickon are alive, and Jon was until recently alive. So, like, it's not exactly unheard of for there to suddenly be an heir popping up.
And of course, a major theme of these novels is that reported prophecy, reported things that happened are often not true. They're often misinterpreted. It's Chinese whispers. It's one of the strengths it's one of the things I really love about Feast, actually, that in the aftermath of this major events of Storm, you just see these garbled kind of reports coming through. And at one point, James was like, where do people get this information? But so the fact that people are saying the Targs are out and the Blackfyres are out, to me, is just almost
proof that there's more of them
around, and that George would want to show us that, because he's always trying to show us that the line between history and myth and news and facts is very blurred.
Yeah.
To go back to the prophecy, would the mummer definitely be Varys, or could it be someone else?
I don't think we really know any other mummers.
Yeah, they could be clubbing. Sorry.
Let's see, Illyrio and Varys, they were working together as mummers, weren't they? Or am I making...
Varys was a mummer before his...
before his thing was cut.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
And then he met Illyrio.
Yeah, Illyrio was a Bravo or something.
Yeah, I love that Illyrio was a Bravo. That's absolutely one of my favorite little details. This just whale of a man used to be like a brilliant swordsmith or whatever.
Yeah, Mama's dragon. That definitely the word has so is it just Varys' dragon, because so Mama is an actor, so actor's dragon. It's not, doesn't mean fake dragon. So Aegon's
not. Aaron Waters.
Aaron Waters.
That is a possibility for Mama's dragon.
Right, he's out there with his fleet, right? He's become a pirate or something.
But he's just this young, probably Dario-style kid, right? I mean, do we really take him seriously as a major puppet master, which the mum would have to be?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
I just don't think Oran Waters has the makings of a mummer. A mummer would have to be, a conniving, manipulative puppet master who's controlling this dragon. And Illyrio and Varys both fall into that category. But Oran Waters, he's just this hot-looking, buff, quite young guy.
No, Oran Waters would be the dragon, and Varys would be his puppet master or something. Yeah, it's just we need more information. I think just another clue or something.
Yeah, I'm not taking Oran Waters seriously in any prophetic capacity.
Yeah, it's just to show how inexperienced Cersei was, that's all.
Okay, so I have a question for you on Tyrion.
All right.
Because he's like one of the most beloved characters along with Arya, and I find them interesting side by side because by this point in the books, they're doing some really quite nasty, dark stuff.
Yeah, they're both...
Do you think that he's still sympathetic?
Also, because I picked Tyrion and Arya. I think he is... I think there's an important distinction between... Yeah, I think he's sympathetic because I think you can look at his character and think, like... It's sort of like you read about someone in jail who did a bunch of bad shit. And you're like, oh, like they had this awful childhood. They were abused, blah, 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 blah. And you can feel like some empathy because you sort of get that their bad actions are a direct result of things that happen to them. But at the same time, people are responsible for what they do. Tyrion is responsible for all the really awful things he's done in his life. Like, you can't blame Tyrion for sleeping with Tysha when his father forced him to. But you can blame Tyrion for the lifetime of whoring, for murdering Shay, for the shit at the brothel, for putting a singer in a pot of stew, for like just a lifetime of pretty vicious brutality. It's possible to exist in this world without being as unpleasant as Tyrion often is. And there are characters who do it. Like, I mean, honestly, Jaime does a better job of not being quite as brutal. Like, Sansa's alive and she hasn't killed everyone, whereas Arya has been in a harder situation and has had to, and you understand why, but it doesn't really take away from the fact that they're still doing pretty unpleasant things, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can sympathize, you can understand why they've done what they've had to do, and you can hope that they have a chance to, like, redeem themselves for it, but just because they needed to do it doesn't mean what they did wasn't wrong. You know, like, I love Tyrion, I love Arya, and I, like, you know, I can't help but be really excited when she assassinates some jerk with a poisoned coin. That was so cool. But it doesn't mean she didn't, you know, she isn't killing people. She's not the angel of death. She doesn't have the right to choose that on some level. Or when she kills Darian. I still love both of them. They're two of my favorite characters.
Okay.
In Tyrion's chapters, does he ever mention Podrick?
No, he's completely right. Like, he's completely forgotten about Podrick.
Because I was reading Brienne's chapters and Podrick mentions Tyrion a lot.
Podrick's hoping to find Tyrion, and he thinks the only way he can find him is by finding Sansa, which is adorably stupid. But no, he never once thinks about him. Tyrion's selfish. He's a bad person. He could do good things. He's done decent things and bad things, but he's not a very good person. And we understand why he isn't. It's because of a lifetime of vicious abuse, but, like, it doesn't mean it doesn't excuse it. It just, it explains it.
Yeah.
So then here's my follow-up question, because there's a great line from, I think it's Jenna Lannister to Jaime, where she's talking about who is the heir to Tywin. Tywin's 1 in 1,000.
What is it? She says, she's like, you smile like Tig, and no, you smile like Garyon and fight like Tig, but Tyrion's Tywin's son. Yeah.
Exactly, and I've always wondered about that, because actually Jenna's really wise and she says a lot of quite astute things.
Yeah, Jenna's brilliant.
But how far is Tyrion Tywin's son? Because, you know, if Tywin's accusation at Cersei, or lots of people's accusation at Cersei, she gets her emotions. She thinks she's Tywin, but actually she's far too emotional. She's like a firecracker. I mean, can't you say also the same of Tyrion, that he's a slave to his emotions, and that he lets
I think you can say the same of Tywin.
Really?
I think Tywin, everyone thinks of Tywin as this scarily emotionless robot who does the smart thing always, and I don't think that's true. I think that Tywin is just, because we only ever see him from the perspective of his children, they see him in this very, like, this, like, awe-inspired way, because he's their dad, and he's their scary dad. But, like, Tywin does stuff like, all right, like, the death of Elia Martell was bad for the Lannisters. It was embarrassing. It made them look like monsters, and it made it harder for the rebellion to end. And it could have made it so that, like, if Ned and Jon Arryn had prevailed, it could have ended badly for the Lannisters, with the Cleganes, with the Gregor sent to the wall, with Jaime sent to the wall. It's just that they were lucky that Robert really didn't care. And Tywin says, like, oh yeah, I never said anything about it. Tywin, the man who thinks about all this shit, doesn't mention to Gregor not to kill her, even though he knows Gregor is a wild monster, and he doesn't like Elia because
Cersei was supposed to marry.
Cersei was supposed to marry Rhaegar, and Elia's mother outplayed him. Oh, he just forgets about her. Whoops. It's all an accident. No, he did that on purpose. Tywin is deeply emotional. Tywin's whole life is based on this, like, is in reaction to his father, just like Tyrion, and is based on this, like, need to keep people from laughing at him, this need to avenge every slight. If Tywin was just being practical, he would have joined the rebellion earlier. He would have not needed to burn King's Landing to the ground. He would have, practical. There's a difference between competent and like truly emotionlessly competent. Bolton is emotionlessly competent.
Yeah. Actually, that's a good point.
But Tywin's just good. Just because he's good at what he does doesn't mean he's not driven by slights and irritation and this sort of need to prove himself, just like Tyrion.
But
It's
he's
just that,
been as out of control as Tyrion or Cersei, has he? He's never had those drinking bouts or those.
but that's because he's in charge.
So he's never been backed into a corner.
I think it's that, like, he was the heir to his father, and once his father died, he took over and, like, did it, and he was the one with power, so he, like, never felt as helpless.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose the one bad thing that happened to him, his wife dying.
Yeah.
Well, I can't blame anyone for that. I mean, that was just nature, so he can't be.
But he did blame someone, and it was Tyrion, and he treated him badly forever for it.
Bender, does he? I mean, he's nasty to Tyrion, but he doesn't completely lose it.
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't destroy himself. He mentally destroys Tyrion.
So
but I think
when I
part of
was
he has a good support network.
So when I was reading Victarion's chapters, I mean, he doesn't really come across as a bad guy. I mean, he's doing horrible things, like drowning people and then taking trolls, and he's just doing bad things. But he doesn't. So I felt like, so is he just doing these stuff because he was born an Ironborn, and is it like nature versus nurture? So
I think that's why Victarion's like the worst person, because Victarion does awful things to people and doesn't even like enjoy it. It's just all he ever does is whine.
Could the same thing apply to Tyrion too? Is just because he's born a Lannister? If he was born like a Tyrell or something, or a Baratheon,
well, I think they all. I mean, I think if
would
Tywin
he be
was
so
less,
ruthless?
I think they'd all be less ruthless. I think the thing is that Tywin makes this family that's so toxic, but Tywin's family isn't toxic. His dad was warm. His brothers were deeply loyal to him. Right. He had a wife who he loved. Like, he had this loyal group of people to like help him work through his 20s and 30s, and now he's in his 40s and 50s. Like, he's an adult. He knows what he's doing. Whereas Cersei and Tyrion have this like toxic environment with really no one to like help them get through it, and that's part of the reason they're so much more destructive. Is just that they have they haven't had the chance to like, they're not as emotionally healthy as Tyrion Lannister, which is really very upsetting. That's like not a good standard.
Yeah, I mean, Tywin definitely had a comfortable family when he was growing up, but he was surrounded by everybody made fun of his father, right? He was called the toothless lion and things like that.
Yeah.
So the mockery and the humiliation that's his torture.
That's what drove him.
Yeah, kind of what Sansa went through, kind of what Arya saw Ned Stark get killed, and then Robb and Catelyn get killed, or was nearby when they killed.
It's yet another reason he's similar to Tyrion.
Right, but for Tywin it was the humiliation.
Yeah, for Tyrion and Tywin both, it's all about him. And Cersei, it's all about humiliation. I think all three of them are very similar. Jaime's the only one who is not like that, and that's just because Jaime's never had to worry about being laughed at.
Yeah, was naturally talented, and then quickly got inducted into the Kingsguard, and he had other issues like obeying a mad king, but yeah.
But Jaime has a very Jaime and Tyrion both, right, use other people. They co-opt other people's words before they use them. So people did mock and laugh at Jaime, certainly, including Cersei, very hurtfully when he loses his hand. But he always, what amazes me on a sort of just a pure Jaime reread, is how much he uses self-mockery, like really brutal self-mockery as a kind of armor. Like, if I say the nastiest things about myself. And it's very similar to the advice that Tyrion gives Jon, like very early on in Game of Thrones.
Advice that Tyrion can never follow.
Yeah, but I find that Jaime, in a way, what I love about Jaime is his tagline. His personal sigil should be Nike, just do it.
That's a good one.
How to deal with shit, and Jaime just does it. He, to me, in a way, he's one of the wisest characters in the end. Although we always see him as the anti-intellectual, he's just the dumb sword-throwing guy.
Right.
But as books progress, I mean, I'm jumping a little bit ahead of here to our talk about Jaime, but he actually, it turns out to be one of the most compassionate and one of the wisest, which is why I was coming back to the Jenna Lannister thing about Tyrion being like Tywin, because in the way that Jaime treats the River Run and Raventree, he actually, to me, seems the most like Tywin in terms of very practical. Let's just sort stuff out. Let's just end it with the least possible hassle. Move on. restore the king's peace. Job done. In a very, because he could be wallowing, he could be as drunk as Tyrion. He's had his hand chopped off. He's been completely screwed over by his sister, but he somehow doesn't seem to descend into that sort of Tyrion-like narcissistic self-loathing that's so damaging to everyone around him. And that was my trauma in Dance with Dragons, that Tyrion was my favorite character up until Dance. And by the end of that book, I was like, I actually got to the point where I couldn't sympathize with him anymore and thought that his wit had kind of fooled me into loving him more than he deserved, because actually he's a very narcissistic and self-loathing and brutal character to be around.
Yeah, he is. It's this sort of, he's so charming that you don't realize in the first 3 books how vicious he is.
General Lannister has grown up with Jaime, so I think when she says that, she hasn't seen what Jaime is like now after he has lost his hand, because that results in a character change. He has to rely on his wits.
Mm-hmm.
He's sort of what Tywin. He's what Tywin wants to be. He's genuinely not afraid of people laughing at him.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, she is right in comparing him to Kevin Lannister, because Kevin Lannister is pretty smart too. Like, he advised making Randall Tarly Cersei's hand, and that's kind of the out-of-box thinking that Jaime showed at River Run by letting Edmure return. So, he's loyal. Kevin Lannister definitely suits Jaime description more.
Do we have other questions on Tyrion for Lee, or thoughts?
Yeah, I think the Penny thing was very interesting. I was gonna ask, how do you guys see of Penny, because we don't really hear much discussion of her, but Penny's dwarf, a dwarf's Penny. I don't.
Of what Tyrion's life would be like if he was born as a common person, I suppose.
Probably worse. Yeah, probably
worse, absolutely.
Yeah.
I actually see Penny as Brian for Tyrion, just like Brian was for Jaime. When everybody moved away from him, his own family betrayed him and moved away. He's got his hand chopped off. His father doesn't care. His sister doesn't care. There was Brian who believed in him. And same thing with Tyrion, like, he believed in Jaime all his life. He wanted to be Jaime, and then Jaime says, "Hey, by the way, the whore is actually not a whore." It kind of hit him a lot, and until Penny showed up, and she kind of did the same thing. She hated him at first, and then she switched around, and she liked him. It was exactly like Brian arc.